me get this pinned on there. And I'm going to invite Chelsea. Okay. Hi guys, just waiting for Chelsea's going to join us in 1 second.
Hello, perfect. I think it worked.
Hi, we actually did it. I'm so proud of us.
Isn't it great when like technology things just work on the first try? It's a miracle.
I was like, this is not going to work today. I just know it. So maybe it was like the doubt that like let Instagram be like, let them have this.
Yes, I think that that's totally it.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just introduce us because we're going to be saving this as an IGTV as well, so people can go back and watch it too. So my name's Amanda, and I am the digital marketing and social media manager at Tastemaker Conference. And we just really wanted to start off this new series to kind of give everybody a taste of what the conferences are like. We now have both virtual and in-person events, in-person coming back in 2022. So excited. And so we just wanted to kind of give everybody a taste of it. So we're going to call this series A Taste of Tastemaker. And basically we're going to go through, ask speakers, sponsors, and other experts to kind of just give us a little bit of their time and kind of just go through one point of their expertise. A lot of these people have a lot more expertise than the time that we're giving them, but it's a way to kind of just give a little taste and then put it in our IGTV so people can watch it later. And then also introduce them to some of our awesome sponsors and speakers, like Chelsea. So today we're joined by Chelsea Cole, and I'm gonna let her kind of give you guys a little introduction about herself, and also about the topic for today, which is why to choose self-publishing. So Chelsea, if you wanna kind of tell everybody about yourself and also your connection with Tastemaker Conference.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So as mentioned, I am Chelsea Cole of A Duck's Oven is my food blog. I am a sponsor of this year's Tastemaker Conference through the Cookbook Lab, which is my course that teaches food bloggers and anybody else who wants to how to self-publish their own books. And a Tastemaker attendee of the past. The last one was in my hometown of Portland, Oregon, which was really, really fun. And so excited to be getting back into the in-person events and the swing of things and all that stuff for the next year. So yay.
Yes, we're so excited to have you on board as a sponsor, and we just love working with you. So today, like I said, we're kind of going to go into why choose to self-publish instead of the traditional route. So once again, Chelsea, I'm just throwing it back to you. Just give us a little bit behind like your reasoning behind all of this.
Yep. So the first time I self-published, I'm in the process of self-publishing again right now, which, woo, it's a whirlwind. It's a big process, but it's so fun. The first time I chose to self-publish, I was frankly impatient. I was like, I have this book idea. I know it's a good book idea. I don't want to spend the time trying to convince a publisher it's a good cookbook idea. I also have no idea like how that process works.
Yeah.
And at the time too, you know, I had been food blogging for 8 years or so, but was really a little bit behind on like the Instagram aspect of it all.
Sure.
And didn't have a huge following. So I had like 2,000 followers at the time. And I was like, I'm afraid a publisher's not going to look at twice at me because I don't have 100,000 plus Instagram followers, which is a thing nowadays. Yeah. And so that led to me figuring out how to self-publish. I also spoke to Melissa Jouan of, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her, Well Fed. So she self-published all of her cookbooks, and they have cookbooks that have done so well. And so I emailed her and just asked her a few questions about it, and then she felt confident, which, you know, I maybe had a little too much confidence in myself that I could just do it. And I did.
Love it. Yeah, I think that's really awesome. I know you also, you know, we'll get into some of the questions, but I've been really enjoying kind of like watching the process from the behind the scenes. And I know you'll share like little snippets from the course and stuff. And like, I really just enjoy seeing like the full process. Like you have written out like a full process for what you need to do for this. And we'll kind of get into that with some of the questions too. I'm going to go through some of the questions that were sent in to us via stories. And then if people have questions, feel free to drop them in the comment box in the bottom, or where it has question, you'll see a little speech bubble with a question mark in it. So our first question I'm going to go to is, well, I'm going to jump to a different one first so it makes sense. But your first kind of thing is, you don't do this necessarily for the money of selling 1 million cookbooks. Can you kind of explain to everybody why you kind of went into this and what your actual like real goal was with it?
Yeah, so the reality is, as alluded to a little bit nowadays, those traditional book deals that you hear about where people get huge advances, where they're making consistent money from their cookbooks down the road, are the Ina Gardens of the world. They are huge food personalities, really, really, really big people. And again, the reality is that's probably not going to be the case for you if you're not one of those people.
Right.
And so what comes with that too is you're not going to be making tons and tons of money. The great thing about self-publishing is you don't have to share, you don't have to split the pie as many ways. So for people who aren't that big, it's a great route because you're keeping the bulk of the money. Most people don't know. So the way like advances and royalties work, you are paid in advance when you work with a publisher, sometimes, not all the time even nowadays. And you don't get to start making royalties until you've sold enough books to start making or to make that advance back, which can sometimes be a whole lot of books. And then when you do start making royalties, oftentimes those royalties are less than $1 per book. They are not very much. And so when you self-publish, and we talk about this a lot, and it's like, it's a little bit more of a complex thing, so I'll just give a quick overview. When you self-publish, you kind of determine how much you make per book, which is great. So the way I tend to self-publish, because I care so much about like the photography and the design, my books are very like expensive books, so I make like between $2 and $3 per book. But I know other people who are totally fine with like a black and white book with very few photos, and they can make like $10 a book, which is pretty incredible. But
Right.
still, you're not making loads and loads of money. This is not like your permanent source of income type money anymore. And so I just tell people, you'll make the money back that assuming that you put in the work of marketing your book, you'll make the money back that you put into the book, but you're not going to make insane amounts of money after that. So the reason I think that everyone should self-publish a cookbook is because it gives you, one, authority in your space, being able to say, hey, I am an author. Here is my book. You can read more about this topic that I'm super passionate about in this book. It's something that gives you authority in a way people understand universally, whereas even though you might put as much time and effort into your blog as you would a book, it's just not as understandable for other people. And it also gives people a reason to talk to you and about you. So when you have something exciting, you have an announcement like, hey, I have this book coming out. It's just an opportunity for you to get speaking gigs, for you to go on live TV, which is like one of my favorite things to do, for you to be interviewed on podcasts and all these things, because there's something, there's this anchor of something for people to actually talk to you about, which is really exciting. And that is a game changer for food bloggers. That kind of earned publicity and earned media is something that can really, really change things for you. One of my favorite stories to tell is I got hired in a more senior day job because of my last cookbook. Is like one of the unexpected things that did for me. So in addition to many, many other things like book signings, tablings at farmers markets, all of these things that I got to do because I had a book to talk about and I had a book to sell.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Well, since we kind of were talking about this, so since the goal isn't really necessarily numbers, somebody did ask what's a good goal number of books to sell, but I think that might be dependent maybe.
It totally is, which is like always the crappiest answer, right? So it's kind of dependent on you and the base that you have. It's also dependent on the topic that you pick. So one thing we talk about a ton in the Cookbook Lab, I have a guide for this too, if you can get it through the link in my bio, about how to determine a good cookbook topic for you. with people who have like not crazy huge followings, I always recommend that they do a super, super niche topic. So that way they're not competing with hundreds and hundreds of other cookbooks. Because if somebody searches something, and so this is where things like the keyword research that we spend so much time learning about really comes in handy, because you can keyword research the topic that you want for your blog and see what kind of search there is for it, search demand there is for it. And so you want to make it so that you are the result for that cookbook. So when I published my cookbook back then, sous vide is kind of like my niche. So it was much lesser known than it is now. It's still not hugely known. But at that time too, all of the people who were talking about sous vide and who were writing about sous vide were men. And all these books were in professional chefs. And all of these books were also really, really masculine looking. And so I came out with a hot pink cookbook for home cooks about sous vide cooking. Whereas all these other books, it was like very fancy, very technical recipes. And I'm like, no, mine's going to be different. It's for home cooks and it's going to be feminine as hell. So
love it. Well, that's awesome. I think you also, you talk about it a lot too, just in general, but you also even mentioned it today. Like, what kind of is your successful marketing strategy? Where do you market? Where do you sell your books?
Yep. So, and this time I'm actually going even bigger with that strategy, which I'm going to be really excited to share more info about later. But one thing that was really great for me with my first book was it really taught me my background is marketing. I was a marketing director before becoming a full-time food blogger this year. But so I'm used to digital marketing, social media marketing, email marketing, all that stuff. All that plays a huge role in your book. One thing I really encourage people to do from the start is talk about the fact that they're creating a cookbook with their audience all the time. Like, you want people to be super hyped about your cookbook. And when you can bring people like behind the scenes with you and really make them feel like they were a part of it, that's powerful. And it's going to make people really excited to support you when that book comes out. So it's just like connecting with your audience in advance. And then one thing that I was really surprised about with my book was how important my local, like, physical community was. So the Portland community was incredible. When I released my book, I got connected with the Portland Culinary Alliance, which I am now a board member of because again, because of the book. And so there's another way it can open doors for you and create opportunity for you. And they were so supportive and had me at so many events to be able to just talk about my book and sell my book. And then also doing tons of local live TV was something I didn't expect to be so incredible and so powerful. Every time I go on live TV, even though local TV doesn't really feel like a huge thing, every single time I go on, I see a massive spike in book sales. So kind of thinking outside the box. And really one thing that I had to learn more about as a marketer, that I think a lot of other food bloggers will be able to relate to this, was PR. So traditional PR, which is different than marketing and the way we think about marketing. And so this time, because I kind of got a taste of the power of that last time, I'm putting in a massive effort for PR this time. So that's kind of like, I hired Tiffany Urich. She's amazing, to kind of give me like a PR boot camp and teach me how to reach journalists and all this stuff. So that's my grand experiment for this time around. I'm really excited to share how that all turns out. Fingers crossed. So yeah.
That's so exciting. I think it's just awesome to kind of see especially how the community engages, right? So even with local TV, you don't think about how many people, and I think maybe it is a generational thing with us. Like, I don't necessarily watch the local news, but my mom will call me and start telling me about all this stuff that she saw in the area. And I'm like, how do you know all of this? And she's like, oh, it was on the TV. And I'm like, you watch the TV for information?
What? The number of people who will be like, my mom loves it every time you're cooking on TV. And I'm like, the moms of the world, man.
The moms and grandmas. That generation, they're who's handling the TV. We gotta just let them have it.
Yep, and they will hype you up about it. So
they really will. They really will. I love that. Okay, so here was a really interesting question. I think I know the answer. I'll let you handle it. But do you take all the photos and do all the styling and everything yourself?
Yes. So for the first book, I did it all. And it's like one thing I always tell people, a hang up I see when I talk to a lot of food bloggers is they don't want to do a book because they don't feel like they're skilled enough yet. And like I said, and that applies especially to photography. Like they just don't feel like their photography skills are good enough yet. And one thing I always tell people is, one, having a project like a cookbook. So one of the great things as a food blogger is a lot of times, especially for people who this isn't their full-time job, a lot of times it can feel like this kind of ambiguous thing, and you have goals and stuff, but like there's nothing like really tying you to them, and it's just this big floaty thing. It's like the best way I can describe it. That was me for so many years.
Yeah.
And so one of the great things about a cookbook is when you tell your followers, I am writing a cookbook, it's going to come out this date. You have said it, you've put it out there, and now
Hold them.
yeah, you're accountable to that. And so a lot of times that can be a really great catalyst to developing those skills. So it's like, okay, I'm finally going to buckle down and go through that photography course I bought, or I'm going to finally buckle down and learn how to use Lightroom better, or whatever it might be. Because like the first time I did my book, I was very proud of my photos. Now I think my photography skills are much, much better. I took Sam Adler's photography mastermind, and I feel like it's done so much for me. And so I'm really excited about this next book and to see how my photos have even improved from the last one. So yes, that's the long answer of yes, I do all my photography.
I love it. No, and we love Sam, and I think it's awesome to kind of see, you can literally look at your books and see how you've progressed in photography. It's kind of like when you're on your blog and you're looking back and you're like, oh, wow, I used to think these were so good. And maybe they were okay. Sometimes I'll look back and be like, that was okay. But like, it's so different. Even from like last year, I'll be like, wow, that has changed so much.
Yeah, same for me.
It happens. Okay, so these two, I kind of feel like maybe can go together. So how long did it take you to do the whole book? And since you don't have an editor, who's been editing your book?
So the beautiful thing about self-publishing is it's all on your own timeline. So for some people, this means taking a lot longer to write your book. And for some people, so again, like the first question was, why did I choose to self-publish? I was impatient. So my first book, and I want to be, so one, I don't have kids, which I'm sure that means if I did have kids, these books would take much, much longer to write. But with my first book, I was working full time. I was in the process of finishing building, not me, but like overseeing the build of our house. I was opening an Airbnb with my mom and full-time blogging, and still managed to pull off a book in just over 5 months. And then this book, I started working on it, like I'd say in earnest in March, like a little bit February, but mostly March. And I'm hoping to have it done mid-August. So you can do them really quickly. This time, it's funny. So this time I am doing it without like that day job, but at the same time, I'm still accountable. Like I still have, brand sponsorships, freelance work, blogging. There's still plenty of other things going on the side. And doing the book, which makes it its own kind of thing. But yeah, about 5 months. And then to answer the editing part, you hire freelancers. So one of the things we talk about in terms of keeping those costs low, a lot of, like I just sent an email out to my email list about this last week, was one thing I do is with my first book, I wasn't making any money from my blog yet. And so I really didn't want to spend a ton of my own money. So I really bootstrapped it and looked for creative ways to make sure the costs were as low as possible. And so one way this applies to the editing process is I proofread the crap out of my own writing before sending it off to someone who I've paid to edit for me. But that also can't be skipped, because I'm sure everybody will be able to relate to this. I will read my own work 1,000 times and still miss very obvious things, because it's just like you get blind to it. So somebody else still has to see it. So yeah, you just hire freelancers. So I hire freelancers to edit copy. That's completely separate from the freelancers that I hire to edit the recipes, because that's just a different type of editing. So yeah, you just find them and hire them yourself. Again, not to plug this 1,000 times, but within the Cookbook Lab, we also have a database of freelancers where people can pull from. And a lot of times that's your fellow food bloggers, which is really fun. So, because they know how to do all these things too, and then you get to work with them.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so we have 2 last questions. I'll try to keep it short, and then I know other people are going to still have questions after that, which you can totally either DM Chelsea or right on the IGTV when it goes live. Okay. What are the biggest mistakes that food bloggers or content creators can make when self-publishing?
Yes. Okay. So this actually ties in perfectly to the last question, and that is doing it in a vacuum. So I think, so two things that I beg the people, the authors I work with to not skip on are, one, having other people test your recipes. And the reason this is so important for your book is with your blog is this live thing. So if somebody tries your recipe, it doesn't turn out well, they email you or leave a comment, you can be like, oh, they're right, or like whatever. You can take that feedback how you will and update the recipe. You can do that for your book, but it's an ordeal to do that for your book. So you really want to make, and also people are paying for your book. So I think it's really important that they're getting a product that's good and that will work for them. And so that means so I have, 40 volunteer recipe testers who are amazing, testing all the recipes for my book. So I always test them myself at least a couple of times to make sure I think that they're good, and then pass them on to testers, and I'll have at least 2 different people test each and every recipe. And so that's really important. And then similarly, like we were just saying, don't skip on editors. You just, even though you think you've read your book to death, you need somebody else to look at it too. So those are definitely the 2 biggest mistakes. And I have seen people who are like, I've made these recipes so many times and they're so easy, I don't think I need a tester. And it's like, okay, but you probably do.
Probably still want someone. Yeah. I have an apple pie recipe that like I just know. Yeah. I've like been making, I took a recipe from when I was a kid and I made it my own, and literally it was like the first recipe I made. And somebody wanted to print it on a tea towel because it was like my thing when I lived in St. Louis. And I kid you not, I read over it like 20 times, didn't see anything wrong with it. And then when I got the tea towel, I like looked at it and was like, this is wrong. I read this, I proofed this, like, how is this wrong? And I was like, I'm just gonna make it, because she already told me that like they sold a couple hundred. So I was like, I'm just gonna make it. So I made it. Terrible. It was like, what did I do?
It's incredible the way that can happen. You're just like blind to it, and then it's like, well, like one minor example from my book that I had to fix was, and again, I had so many people read it, and this got printed still, which we talked about in my interview with Joni, was I had like 3 slices of bacon, and it should have been 3 slices of cooked bacon. And that's like a very important distinction. And you just,
so important.
Oh, yep.
It happens. Well, yep. I think you kind of answered the last question, but is there anything else that you wish you knew before you self-published your first book?
I think it's both like, it's more work than you expect. And I think that most people can assume that. But at the same time, one thing that I found, like, yes, the like workload itself is more than I expected, but there was nothing about it that I couldn't do. Like, it took me a lot of trial and error, a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of just like having to figure things out on my own. And like, you learn these other languages because you learn about other platforms and things like that, but it's all doable and less scary and so much more worth it than I expected it to be. I mean, like, I'm doing it again. I wouldn't be doing it again if it weren't worth it. So
totally makes sense. Well, thank you so much for coming on here today and giving everybody a little taste of Tastemaker. Can you let everybody know where to find you and where to find the Cookbook Lab?
Yes. So you can find me at A Duck's Oven. It's a duck's oven because I started it while at the University of Oregon. Their mascot is the duck. So yes, it's like the animal. You can DM me any questions. I'm happy to chat at any time. And you can find more info about the Cookbook Lab at aducksoven.com/cookbooklab. If you want that cookbook topic guide I mentioned earlier, that's aducksoven.com/determine.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for being on here today. If you haven't already, go ahead and grab your virtual ticket to our Tastemaker Conference for September. It's in the link in our bio at Tastemaker Conference. And we just released our very exciting March 2022 Chicago tickets, which also include a ticket to the virtual conference. So if you're looking to double down, go ahead and grab that ticket. Both of them are linked in our bio at Tastemaker Conference. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Thanks, Chelsea.
Thank you.